So I'll tell you a little bit about me. I'm not going to bore you too much. I'll say first and foremost, I'm highly jealous of this lab, this facility. When I went to high school in Raymore Peculiar, which is not far from here, back in 96 to 2000, nothing like this existed. We had, if you wanted to do AV, you had to get into the theater department because they're the only ones that even had a soundboard. They were the only area that even had speakers to mess with. If you wanted to touch lighting, you had to be part of theater. So there was no dedicated AV department when I went to school, and that was not that long ago. It's been about 18 years, so things have changed a lot. When I was able to get into a lab like this, it was about 2004, 2005, and I paid 30 grand for a 2-year program to have access to workstations like this and studios that you have readily available. So take advantage of it. If you're really into it, these types of tools will take you a long way, and it'll take you there pretty fast, a lot faster than people my age and even people before me were able to get to it. So a little bit about myself. For 7 years, I've been an IT and AV project manager. So what I do is literally help people build facilities like this. So when you see the hanging speakers, when you see the access control on or the touch panels on the side of the room, those are things that I do on my day-to-day basis. I've led teams for deployment. You know, a lot of stuff is Cat6 data networks, and then you have audio video that rides right next to it or on top of it too. So we have the ability to take HD and 4K video and run it 300 feet down a single Cat6 line. So if anybody's ever heard of HD-based T or video extension, that's the kind of stuff that we do. Now, we still have practical audio distribution where you have just rooms full of racks and amplifiers, and that's what powers speakers that like you see right here. And you know, how do you go about developing all of that? You know, obviously people have budgets that you have to stick with. You're going to have specific expectations. Is it playing music in a lobby? Is it just for an emergency system? All kinds of different things in between. Paging, you know, please come to the office, or you know, so-and-so did something bad or whatever. So you never know how that sound system is going to be used, but it is a sound system. And that's the cool thing is that, you know, AV kind of exists a little bit everywhere now, whereas 10, 15, 20 years ago, you know, you might have had a lobby that had a Muzak station, but not the same control that we have today of, you know, video walls with your temperature, you know, your thermostat sitting right out there. That's some cool stuff. So that's a lot of what I do in my day-to-day, just kind of developing those projects. As you know, some are 2-day projects, some are 2-year projects. You just never know. On the side, I've always been a MC DJ, and I've been an audio, video, and lighting operator. So, if, you know, when you go to the community theater or corporate events, weddings, things of that nature, you know, I DJ, I'll get on a mic, I'll MC a little bit, I'll play music when I need to, and just do a lot of sound and lighting reinforcement. I've done lighting for Quixotic a few times. So if you're into that,
know what that is?
I don't know. Have you seen the Quixotic group? Like anybody heard of like what is the Fire Festival or the Water Fire Festival? Sometimes if you ever go down to a crossroads, you'll see the Quixotic is an aerial group. So kind of think Cirque du Soleil. Yeah. If you ever seen a Cirque du Soleil show, there's a Kansas City group called Quixotic that's downtown, right by the Kaufman Performing Arts Center. Great group of people, do a lot of cool stuff. You'll see them around town, and as you get older, you know, become adults and get out in the world, you're going to start enjoying some of those things if you like the arts and maybe the non-traditional arts. And then above and beyond that, being a DJ and operator, I also do sound design, installation, and engineering for other companies. So, you know, I've got my day job stuff, but then there's a lot of times where people come to me and say, James, hey, we know that that you went to school for audio engineering and live sound. We're not doing like a school facility, we're not doing an office facility, we're doing a venue. So I've done professional sound systems in about, I think, 5 different venues just in the last year and a half. That's where we're taking QSC and JBLs and pro stuff that you would see at a concert hall or at Uptown Theater or Sprint Center even. I mean, not to that level yet, but you know, maybe sometime soon, you know, get some line array stuff. But I'll give you a brief introduction of myself. You know, I'm 36, so I can say I've been doing music for 30 years. At age 6, I started with piano, I was in choir, I started playing with computers. I don't even know if anybody in this room knows what a 286 is, but that's where I started. At 10, I was soldering, building computers, 286, 386, so I was already kind of at the forefront of technology. Age 12, they asked me to run sound for church services. That was the first time I ever operated a control board, you know, making sure that people sounded good, running microphones, things of that nature. At 13, got my first guitar, kind of didn't do much choir or piano after that, until I got back into other stuff later. But even in the early 90s, MIDI existed. That MIDI technology still, I don't know if it's still fairly used today. I'm sure these are all MIDI triggers here. You guys are using what, Reason, Ableton, a little bit of both? Logic?
They've got Reason.
Yeah.
And Ableton, free or cheap. Ableton
Okay,
cheap.
yeah. Yeah, whenever you can get software, definitely take advantage of it. I would say at age 15, my first true AV integration was for the theater department. So you guys have seen Hamlet, you know that play? You know, the monologue series where he's like the dark chamber, and the director really wanted me to create this. He heard that I had built some electronics, and he wanted me to create a red flashing floodlight that strobed to the heartbeat from the soundboard. And so we took a line and we sent it down to the front of the set, and we had 2 red floodlights that were built into the bottom of the set, and they literally, we didn't just click a button, it literally just followed the music. So the sound guy queued it up, it went, lights flashed to the music. That was like freshman year of high school. That was like my first true taste of how far can it go with integrating audio and video. And lighting is part of that as well too. At 16, I got picked up. My first job was an internship at KCPT. I was doing art design and programming. We created one of the first online college databases for college courses that included the MCC, JCC, Avila, Maple Woods, all that. We kind of created the first college online class database. So that was a fun project. I also worked on some like interactive kids programs where we would use image mapping and image maps and Photoshop, and we would slice out little icons, and we kind of created push button control surfaces for kids to learn about science and dinosaurs and other cool stuff. So that was technically my first job in high school. I stayed there for about a year and a half, and then I went back for my senior year. But before that, I did some contract website for a photography studio, Mike Freeland of Freeland Photography. I've known him for a long time. So he was converting from film, medium format film, to digital cameras, or actually digital cameras weren't quite there yet. So he was still, at that time, a medium format photography shop. So one of my first gigs with him was scanning all these files on a flatbed scanner, cropping them, digitizing them, and then building a code to a website, you know, to sell them. I mean, and in the early 90s, there weren't a lot of shopping carts. You guys all know what a shopping cart is because you had it available since probably the time that you were born. But at the time, we thought we were pretty hot stuff because we think we were maybe the first online photo shopping cart at the time, and this was like 97, I believe. So 96, 97, 98. At the same time, me and my buddy started DJing the junior high dances. We were in high school, we were DJing the junior high dances. We would take a CRT. Does anybody know what a CRT is? One person? So the big tube TVs, you know, the big tube monitors that you guys don't have to deal with. We used to carry a tube monitor around with our big desktop tower, and we were doing digital DJing in 98, 99 too. MP3s were probably just a couple of years old. But so we do the high school, or not the high school, but the middle school dances. At the same time, I was theater tech crew. So after that first heartbeat integration thing, they kept me around. So they had started having me run lighting cues and sound cues and operating during the shows. At that time, I was also the photography darkroom manager. So we still had a black and white film lab in our school. And so I managed the chemicals, who had access to it at what point in time, making sure that it was clean and things were happening the way they should. And then when I was done with school and I was out in the world and following around some of my musician friends, I would take my Handycam 8mm video recorder and I would go out and record music shows, rock shows, rap artists, stuff like that. So by the age 18, by the time I was graduating high school, I'd probably already, had a pretty good amount of experience with different types of projects. I started doing more events, parties, sound for bands, flyer designs for some of those shows, and then I probably like 20 or 30 different websites for either bands, hip hop artists, or other musicians. And this was all before 2000. So it took a lot of work to pull all this stuff off pre-2000. There weren't the supporting technologies like you have today. So again, if you're really interested, it's really easy to get going, and man, you guys have all of the tools sitting right here in front of you to create anything. At 20, was about 2002, I went to a place called Music Tech College, McNally Smith College of Music. It is actually no longer open, so my piece of paper is The only thing that it's worth is the education that I got. But it was a great school. I'm sure you guys have heard of Full Sail, right, down in Florida. So a lot of people from Full Sail, or a little group of Full Sail teachers and instructors decided to migrate up to the Twin Cities and started a school up there for production, audio engineering, and things of that nature. So there's a performance group, and I would say that of the 300 people that went to that school, 200 of them were performance majors, guitar players, keyboardists, songwriters. The other 100 of us were the nerds behind the consoles, the guys that in classes like this doing production work, learning how to record bands, mixing, mastering, and then they had your live soundtrack. So my degree was in audio engineering, studio recording, and live sound. So I kind of pieced all those things together as I was younger, and then finally I went and paid for my formal education. I think nowadays you have all kinds of options, even through the MCC schools, or as JCC has an audio engineering program. Again, these were things that when I was in school didn't really exist unless you wanted to go pay 30 grand for a 2-year program at a private school. So again, take advantage of what you can. A lot of stuff between 20 and 36, obviously. We could spend all day talking about that, but that's where I'll just kind of leave my intro or bio at where we're at now. Again, like I said, I've been a project manager, freelance AV. I do some content creation, so when it comes to, I'm an Adobe Cloud member, so I use After Effects, Photoshop, Illustrator when I need to. I think I started literally when it was Photoshop version 1. That was back when I was in high school. And then I'm on a roster for AV Crew for Hire. So as you get older, sometimes you want to make a quick buck. You can apply to be on a roster if you want to, move carts off a diesel truck into an event center and set up lighting and set up, projectors for big conferences and things like that. I've been at all the hotels downtown, built video walls, done cool projection projects, and it's a good way to make money, And as you become adults and you want to be involved in the industry, not everybody gets to be a rock star right out of the gate. Not everybody gets to be the studio engineer right out of the gate. That's what we're all here trying to learn, and we all have aspirations like, hey, I want to be that DJ, I want to be that creator, I want to be the person I want to be the Timberland or the JT or the Taylor Swift. That's kind of where we all maybe develop some of that drive and motivation from. But there's a lot of ways that you can kind of, maybe not while you're on that journey, there's a lot of ways that you can kind of keep developing and moving forward, even if it's not exactly the way that you think. And anyway, also DJ MC, I mentioned that before. Just recently I started building with Arduino. And I can tell you a little bit about how things like Arduino and Raspberry Pi actually have practical application in the AV world and in the integration world. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with those little boards. And I also do some 3D designing now. For 3D printing, we've 3D printed a few of our own fun things, light up watches and things like that. So a lot of cool stuff out there, and a really exciting time to be involved in technology.
Any questions at this point?
Yeah. I don't want to be too lecture person. I was never that.
What is the college called?
It was called Music Tech College. Before it was changed to McNally Smith College of Music, and now it's no longer a school. It kind of fell prey to kind of what happened with ITT Tech or some of the other schools of that nature. So fortunately, I paid off my tuition before they decided to forgive everybody. So there's some people that hadn't, and they got let go. But I paid mine off like a good kid. Anyway,
We'll all come back around.
yeah. So the reason I'm up here is basically just to talk about AV, and AV to me is everywhere. Kind of already mentioned a little bit here in this space. A majority of what I do day to day is a lot of residential AV, and 10 years ago we all had a TV. Maybe 10 years ago we had 2 TVs. Maybe 20 years ago we had a TV. Maybe Dad had a stereo in the den, and that was about it. Nowadays we all have our cell phones, audio, video. We all have our Sonos players. You stick it in the corner. We all have the Alexa and stuff like that. And I'm sure that you've probably seen the commercials where Alexa's turning lights on and off and things of that nature. So a lot of what I do is residential audio, video lighting, and automation. And what that means is that we'll take a closet in somebody's house and we put multi-channel amplifiers. Channel 1 goes to the kitchen. Channel 2 goes to the living room. Channel 3 goes to the patio. Channel 4 goes to the master bedroom. And so you have a point of audio input and output, and you can start basically pushing music and other things to different parts of the house. If you're having a party or hosting or something like that, everybody's listening to the same thing in all 5, 6, 7, 8 rooms. Game time when the Chiefs are on or the Royals are playing, you can have all TVs synchronized and watching the same thing. Or you could have a room in a house that has 3 TVs, and you want to watch something completely different on each TV, 3 different games. And so, a lot of what I do at my core is building these distribution points, distribution systems. But it's really very simple compared to like Pro AV, or if you know what a mixer is, each output, so you have your master output, that could be my master bedroom. One AUX 1 could be your kitchen, an AUX 2 could be your, so I don't know if, if you guys work with that kind of stuff, just trying to give it some relatable terms here. This is like one of the biggest business drivers right now today. There's always been conference rooms, there's always been distributed audio in spaces like this, but when you think about doing audio, video, and things of that nature, you could literally make an entire lifetime business out of just doing residential home AV, because people love to listen to music, people love to watch TV, and there's tons of new stuff. Like those Sonos players, those are like the coolest thing that I've seen in a long time. You get it on the network, set it in a room, away you go. The fact that you can group those, and it's really, like I said, it's an exciting time to be playing around. Commercial audio, that's pretty much kind of what we're talking about here. Airports, malls, tech centers, event centers, things of that nature. Office buildings, conference room, overhead mic, music and TVs, kind of like what we have here in this room. Restaurants, sports bars, menu boards are a big one too. You go to a fast food restaurant now, you don't see the old school boards anymore. Now you're seeing TVs and you're seeing a digital representation. So, if you're a content creator, you could have an entire business line basically building content boards for fast food corporations, or for your local your local smoothie shop or something like that. So there's tons of advantages to be found there as well. We've done a little bit of content creation, not for restaurants, but things of that nature. Maybe some smaller stuff. Ordering communication. Obviously the microphone is that you use to order your cheeseburger, but even today, those are becoming AV devices because they've got you on the microphone, they've got you on the video, they're specifically chosen for that. You wouldn't put like a Shure SM58 on an ordering station. You're going to select a specific type of thing. Event venues, that's like the pie in the sky. That's what everybody dreams of. I want to go operate in Sprint Center. I want to go be the guy that runs sound at Sandstone and things like that. That's kind of where I grew up. Or that's where I kind of came from. That was my motivation. I always wanted to be that guy I want to be the guy in the sound booth for the biggest rock shows, or running the lights, or running the graphics and things of that. So it exists, and that part's a lot harder to get to. Like I said, I've been doing it probably for about 16 years as an adult, since I was 20, and I've yet to hang a line array in a concert venue, but I'm only 36, so there's still plenty of time. And then another cool area that I've noticed, and you're going to see crop up as well too, is automotive and sport vehicles. And everybody knows how popular sport vehicles are becoming. Well, those need speaker systems too. Crestron, which is what runs that touch panel over there. There are yachts and mega yachts and cruise liners, and they all need high-tech and fancy AVs. You'll even get into some limos or stretch buses that even have AV built into them as well. So there's a lot going on. Almost every public space has some form of audio, video, or lighting control. We're all go back 20 years, we're like, cool, it's on, it's off. It kind of started back then. Maybe it was 30 years.
You guys even know what clapper is?
So, it's like, that's where it started, is that you didn't want to get out of bed, you wanted to turn the light on or off or whatever. But now it's like, now we have full range with all these cool technology products where we can say, hey Alexa, set my lights in the living room to 30%. That's an amazing thing to be able to achieve these days, and it's only getting better, only getting better at this point in time. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea of every person in this room is going to have a different idea of where they want to go in life and what they want to do and what kind of track they want to carve for themselves. And I kind of wanted to put out there that you can literally do whatever you want. You can almost make a lifetime business out of all these different areas. And so, AV is not just traditional, hey, I'm going to be a producer, hey, I'm going to be an engineer, hey, I'm going to run live sound, or hey, I'm going to be an artist. Those are very select things, and people are highly competitive in all those markets. But again, it's like, you know, there's nothing wrong with going in and being the guy. Like, for me, it's nice because I've got a house that's built on the south side of Lake Winnebago. It's $1 million house. They spent $85,000 on their in-home AV, 16 TVs, 14 zones of audio, and then lighting control throughout the place as well too. So, you know, you come home and you're in this mansion on the lake, you can hit one button and that one button turns on 2 TVs in the kitchen, 1 in the living room, a couple lights in the foyer and lobby area, and then start streaming your favorite Pandora station, you know, all with a single button press. And so I'll keep mentioning Crestron because Crestron's not the brand that I use, but it's a competitive brand that I use. So as you see those touch panels around, those are the capabilities that you have, and that's the type of technology that gives you those capabilities too. So I'll, again, if you guys have anything to stop me on, let me know. I don't really have a formal way to go with all this stuff, but and again, it's my first time really presenting, so.
Questions at this point? Do you guys notice all the AV that surrounds you a lot of times, like when you're out? I mean, I go to fast food quite a bit, so I like to see the digital menus. And you look at the video quality, and you just the last few years how much better those have gotten. And you're at McDonald's, and you're watching this moving video of a latte or whatever.
Become so common.
Yeah, ubiquitous.
That's a good point, you know. Well, and that's where, like, for us, I mean, for me in high school, it was like AOL chat was pretty cool, you know. You dialed into your chat room, and that was about it. There was no social, and you didn't see things like video walls, and projection was still pretty early on. But anyway, so the reason that I was asked to be brought in here, I don't know if Sean, how much you guys have talked about it in class previous, or looked at either floor plans or the space before, or?
We've talked about it a little bit.
A little bit?
So they just know of it vaguely. They haven't seen any of the pictures.
Okay, well let me do this. This is the Beck space. This is an event venue down in Harrisonville. It's really, if you've been down in Harrisonville, there's like a courthouse area, kind of like an old town, almost like the old, you know, downtown Lee Summit area, but obviously there's a lot more going on in Lee Summit than down in Harrisonville. But we had some people that wanted to build this venue, and it sounds like you guys have talked about it a few times. And what I'll do before I go anywhere else is, let's see if I can get this 360 to spin around.
And while you're doing that, how long ago did he get the space, or did?
So I did the install here. I also DJ here. I've been DJing for over a year, so I'm going to use that to backtrack. So I think a year and a half ago, maybe it was last April or May, they started actually booking events and hosting events. Previous to that, there was about 6 to 9 months of construction, and previous to that, there was floor plans and you know, deciding what they wanted to do and what the budget was and how much, you know, how much did they want to spend and what were they actually trying to achieve. So this space was pretty like destroyed on the inside. Just think of like a warehouse that you walk into and the floors are busted, there's dirt everywhere, nothing's finished, half the windows were busted out, some of them were even boarded up. So there was a whole process of like, all right, we've got to completely gut the rest of this building before we can even get started on the redo of it. And you know, they went with the purpose of turning this place into a wedding event venue. The owners are both wedding event photographers. They've worked in the business for 20 years. They've worked in almost every event venue and space that you could think of here in Kansas City. So their goal in building this space was creating a spot that was conducive to weddings and events and keeping all of these very specific things in mind, to the point of they didn't want to see anything on the walls, they didn't want to see cables anywhere, they didn't want to see a lot of, you know, like as a photographer, you see that fire exit thing, and that's the code. If they didn't have to have it there, they wouldn't want it. Because every time they're taking a picture, it's like, oh, now there's that fire exit in the back of the picture. That doesn't look great for portraits. So there was a huge investment in time and design on this to say, hey, we want to come in, we want this place to look really nice and clean, because we don't want to detract from the fact that we're selling an event space for weddings. And if you've done any photography, or if you've done any portraiture, if you've ever you might get asked to go out and do a second shooter at a wedding sometime soon, especially if you like playing with not film, but cameras and cameras and other imaging devices. There's a lot of people make a living being photographers and videographers and things of that nature. Start with a Canon Rebel or something like that, and you can pretty much start a business, in 6 to 9 months, doing that kind of stuff. So they came to me and they said, James, hey, we want to build this space out, and we've got a sound system that we're taking from the photography studio. And so I was like, well, is that really what you want to do? And they're like, yeah. At first we met and they're like, hey, what can we do? What should we buy? What if we had a $30,000 budget? Well, what happened was, and it almost happens every time, is that towards the end of the construction process, that AV fund budget just shrank and shrank and shrank and shrank because, now we got to replace the HVAC system, and now we've got to put in a whole new electrical panel. You can go without fancy audio video, but you can't go without running water. You can't go without HVAC. You can't go without a sprinkler system. So even though we had hoped to have like a $30,000 to $40,000 budget, which would have bought a nice new sound system, that just didn't exist at the end of the construction process. So I kind of got squeezed out towards the end. Not a big deal, but they had a AV system that they were bringing over from the studio. Ironically, I'd actually set that I set that sound system up in that photo studio 7 years previous. So I was like, yeah, I know what it's capable of. We can give it a shot. Let's try it out. And it got the doors open, and we've done about 25 events on the sound system that's in there current. The sound system is totally not a live sound system. It was some speakers that we put in an office building. It honestly is a lot like these speakers that you have hanging here. So imagine you've got 6 in this class, which is great, which means that you don't have to really try that hard to get you to hear anything, because each one of these speakers is only really needing to project 4 or 5 feet. So imagine a space this big, probably 4 or 5 times the room, and we only have 7 total speakers. That's what's up there currently. That's what they had. They didn't want to spend any money, but I mean, as you can see, this is a large room. So, and you can kind of maybe see, like there's one of the speakers that's up there now. Like I said, there's 7 in here, but I think each speaker is total capacity is like 40 watts. So 7 times 40, 280 watts. Pretty low, you know what I mean? Like I think your car stereo probably has at least 100 or maybe 150. So we were kind of trying to do the impossible on a limited shoestring budget. I have a portable PA system, and so what would happen is that they would book me to come in and DJ. I was really the only one using the house system for music. But after a few events, we're like, you know what, I started feeling like, hey, this doesn't cut it. So I started bringing in my own sub. And then I started bringing in my 2, I've got some 8-inch EV monitors that, that have been good for portable DJing. And then some JBL 15s that if we had 300 people in the room and we really need to push some air, then I had that. But I kept telling them, like, hey guys, I'm using the in-house system, but I'm bringing my system every time, so I'm doing twice the work and not getting paid the extra for it. So long story short, here we are a year later. We finally made the investment, and we did some convincing and kind of back and forth on, all right, well, how are we going to upgrade? What's our overall budget, and how's this all going to happen? So the cool thing for me is that I was able to say, hey, I'm a pretty big fan of QSC, and I don't know if you guys talk a lot about that type of gear or not, or I don't know if anybody even has that type of gear or not, who knows. But if you go to Guitar Center, you can go into the Pro Audio division and you can find QSC and JBL and Mackie and a bunch of other different brands. And I'm not here to push one brand or the other. I like what I like, and I use what I like to use. So
I couldn't believe they were local. Like, I was at John Knox Pavilion, and a QSC rep was there, and I was like, are you just in town? He's like, no, I'm based out of somewhere around here.
Are they really?
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, okay. So I thought maybe that was...
Well, I wonder, so the weird thing about tech companies, though, is that you can have a rep in a town, and what that means is that guy works out of his home, and he just represents that specific...
Yeah, he may or may not even represent Missouri, though, I guess.
Yeah, he could be a district guy, or, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but, so you never really know with the product guys, like, where they actually come from or anything like that.
So that's a good bang for your buck, the QSC stuff.
QSC is definitely a bang for the buck. QSC versus JBL, yeah, Crown is part of that too. So a lot of things that we've watched as a pro AV person is a lot of buyouts. So there's a company called Harman. Harman has bought out JBL, has bought out Crown, has bought out a few other companies along the same lines and just consolidated them all. The cool thing about that is they create products that I'll talk about here in a moment, that when you start merging two companies together, you get to like take advantage of each company's strengths and get rid of each company's weaknesses. So again, let me see if I'm back into present. Let's get that. So here's what we have currently. This is for like the tech geeks and everything, and I'll show you this software here shortly. But so we had these 8-inch, what was called 70-volt speakers. I won't get into the how 70 volt works and why. I can tell you why you use 70 volt, and I'd be surprised to say that these speakers here in this room weren't 70 volt, because it's a very cost-effective way to distribute a lot of speakers. I can see that there's probably an in and an out cable on each one of those hanging speakers, and what they do is they have one amplifier, one signal, speaker to speaker to speaker to speaker to speaker to speaker. Now you would want to do that with your home speakers, because when you start bridging speakers and daisy chaining, your home speakers are 8-ohm speakers, and so you take two 8-ohm speakers and put them together, then you got 4 ohms. If you take 4 speakers and you wire them all together in the wrong way, you're trying to pull 2 ohms, and your amplifier is only rated for 8 ohms. And so if you put a 2 ohm load on your amplifier and you try to crank it up, eventually you're going to fry stuff. So that's where these types of systems are easy to distribute. That's why in the studio, when he had this sound system in the studio, it made sense, because it was, hey, we just want speaker, 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 speaker. They're all playing the exact same thing, no stereo field, and whatever. So this is what we had to do with, and even though it wasn't my ideal scenario, it's what we had. And I'll show you the software here shortly. You guys you don't have to worry about the actual numbers up there, but I didn't know if I was talking to engineering level class or building class or design class. But so each one of these speakers in a 70 volt configuration, the total power and the power that we had it tapped at was 40 watts. So that's where, like, at 40 watts times 7, we had 280 total watts of power potential. And then we've got the software, and this is a very industry standard software. It's actually, you can download it for free. It's called EASE, E-A-S-E. And what EASE does is it allows you to take known speaker models, put them on top of a floor plan, and kind of get an idea of what the frequency response of the room is. So this is kind of their current setup. And you factor in the room size, which is like 50 by 90, and then you factor in the beam height. So that beam height is where we had the speakers attached to. That beam height is just shy of 14 feet. So this software is like, okay, at 14 feet in the air, and I'm trying to listen at 5 feet in the air, our ear height when you're standing, the best that you can get in this position is 92 dB. You take a couple steps, you take 10 steps, you're going to drop 88 dB. Anybody know anything about dB, how that works, how it, doubles and halves based off of 3, up and down? No? Okay, so when you say 93 dB, and then you go down to 90 dB, that's actually half. So you're like, okay, I have half of the sound pressure now hitting my ears. So when you would walk across the room to 85 dB or 83 dB, you're like 2 or 3 times quieter over in this section. And so anybody that's over here, they're not going to be able to hear over the conversation that's happening right here, because people are loud, they're having fun, they're competing against the music that's over here, so the guy over here doesn't hear anything. Or if they do, it's like, that's not good. Because then they don't understand. They just miss the fact that you told them, there's 5 minutes left on the photo booth, you better get in there, otherwise you miss your shot for the night, or we're now going to do the cake cutting or the first dance, so be quiet. So that's been the challenge. And so that's where the problem came from, and that's where we're going to a different solution. So we had 7 speakers that were total capacity 40 watts. We're going with a QSC K10, so it'll be a 10-inch subwoofer on the inside. And then each speaker, we're gonna have 4 of them. Each speaker, the big one to notice here is 1,800 watts. So one speaker is gonna be potential louder than the entire system that we had there in the first place. but because we had a huge room, we couldn't just put one speaker in there or just 2 speakers. So we elected to go with 4 with the potential that we might float to 6 based on kind of some factors that we'll talk about here shortly. And then we're also going to do a subwoofer that's going to sit under our staircase. But so when we're in this space, and this is what I was going to talk about a little bit of the conversion stuff. So we've got our inputs and outputs. So we have 2 microphones. I'm the DJ. I've got my DJ mixing console. They have Control 4, which is like Crestron. It has a built-in Pandora player and stuff like that. So when there's no DJ, when they're showing off, or maybe even like just a light dinner or something like that they're hosting that doesn't have a DJ, they can still play music. And then we've got a video projection input. So much like we've got a laptop plugged in over there, you can have an audio chain for that, and then you need to get that into the mixer. So this is the small mixer that we went with. Again, it was more of a cost feature thing. The cool thing about Soundcraft is that if you look on there, there's Lexicon, DBX, Digitech. So that means you have technology from all 3 of those brands. All 3 of those companies manufacture EQs, compressors, outboard gear for studios. So they're a Harman brand product as well. So as some of these bigger guys buy up multiple companies, they start making products that have all these cool different feature sets. So this little mixer is buried in the closet. There is no like front of house mixing spot in this venue. It's completely IP driven. So what you're looking at here is just a basic control surface from a laptop, a cell phone. If you're on the Wi-Fi, you can talk to it. Here's an example of per channel, I can do an EQ curve on a single input. So I can have this really drastic EQ curve for my mic inputs and then come over to my DJ gear and then just have like a small little roll off, or maybe I don't even touch it because my music comes out pretty nice. So we'll have 2 master outputs, left and right. So out of 4 speakers, we could say immediately like, hey, maybe 2 sets of speakers are left and maybe 2 sets of speakers are right. Or what I plan on doing with the 4 first and foremost is saying, hey, we've got a left and a right, and then up top you see we've got an aux output. I got an aux 1 and an aux 2. So I can run all 4 of these speakers completely isolated on the output. And the reason that we would want to do that, going back to the floor plan, and forgive the kind of the fun, these are the kind of like notes that we pass back and forth from each other, over, hey, maybe we should try this configuration. Hey, maybe we should try this configuration. So we decided, hey, let's get 4 QSC speakers. And one of the owners, who's not really an audio person, says, well, hey, can we put just a speaker in the corner? That way you don't see them anywhere, like they're not on the rafters. Let's just shove speakers in the corners. I was like, well, I mean, you can, but then you've got 116 dB in the corner, and when you get to the center of the room, you're down at 100. Like that's a pretty inefficient way to utilize these new speakers. So that's why we've talked about different configurations, like here's 2 on one beam because there's doors right here, and a lot of times you'll have events that go this direction. Here's maybe 2 here on these beams that kind of capture this center, because a lot of times you'll have somebody speaking here or speaking here, but the room's kind of cut off. So we haven't actually finalized that just yet. But when you're working with people that don't know anything about audio and they say, hey, can we just do this? You almost have to prove to them like, well, you can do anything you want, but if you really want to be the most effective, you got to put some thought behind it. And that's where some of this software can really help kind of showcase that. And I said, well, what if we did 5 and we did something like that? And now you can see now there's not a spot in the room, even up in that top corner, there's not a spot in that room that goes below 100. And then they kind of were like, well, how about this little funky thing? And I was like, so there's still some debate about it. And that's the thing, when you're doing the install, when you're doing the designing, there's always like, hey, I want to do this, but it costs too much, it doesn't look as good, and everybody has their expectations on what they want to happen. So, so that's kind of where we're picking speakers out. We're going to be setting that up here this week. Again, I think we went from, I think the best that we had in the graph before was like 90 something in terms of total dB and listening height, to now we're going to be at over 100 in every spot of the room. And I'll show you this software real quick. You can always, it's free stuff that you can download. I'll just kind of show you how I get to these, how we get to the solution, how we get to the end of the game of like, hey, this is what we're going to do, this is where we should go. And chances are this building has been in this software, and they use that software to say, hey, you know, to the people that built this place, whoever's in charge of all of it, they probably sat down and said, well, here's what it's going to look like, and here's your coverage and everything. And then that's when somebody's like, yep, that sounds great, that's what we want, here's the check, go ahead and do it. So again, I'll pull up the current situation. So you can see there's the speakers. I can turn that mapping on. I can right click anywhere and I can say, hey, right there I'm getting 90 dB. Out here I'm only getting 80. So this is like an easy way for you to real time. It takes a little bit of processing. So if I were to slide a speaker, you see now it's got to regenerate that graphic and say, you know what, now I'm doing the calculations and I'm saying, okay, now it's, we're changing some stuff here. So again, 2-3 feet away from standing in front of the face of the speaker, as close as I am to this one right here, the best that this speaker could do is 90 dB. You'll know how loud dB can get. I mean, we all have seen the Arrowhead numbers. What is it, like 116, 120, something? I can't remember what was the dB record for Chief Stadium. Pretty loud. But so 90 goes away pretty fast. People can yell over 90 pretty easily, or talk over 90 pretty easily too.
Anybody gonna download this? Or the nerds that are gonna? You can make a case that you need to buy more speakers for your house. I want to see your PowerPoint presentation with your parents. You need more speakers.
No, absolutely, and that's the thing. That's what this software truly is to sell. I mean, audio's theory. Obviously, we can always just go out and buy some speakers and say, hey, it just needs to be louder, and you buy some more speakers and it gets louder. This software technically is geared for sales engineers, salesmen, and it's to say that, hey, if you want that even coverage where you never lose anything, even in a room like this, you need 6 speakers. Now, if they took 4 of these speakers away, put one over here, one over here, they turn it up a little bit, chances are you're probably going to get by with it. But to have true, pure, audio dispersion, this is the way you would do it. So this is kind of where, I said, hey, we've got these new ones coming in, and the numbers don't show up right now for some reason. My software is being kind of weird. That's what you get for free is weird. But I wanted to say, hey, this is the front barn door. A lot of their events go this way. Hey, a lot of your other events come this way, so let's try this. And it's really a challenge because in a traditional venue, you go to a house of worship or a church or something like that. The speaker's always in the same spot. The crowd is always in the same spot. The room never changes, so you basically just push everything one direction. Well, in this venue, sometimes they put a curtain up halfway through, or a lot of times they'll put a curtain halfway through and the ceremony is here and the reception's there. Sometimes they have a speaker here. Sometimes they have people in the center of the room doing a ceremony. So it's a very dynamic space and it requires a lot of kind of nuancing. On top of all that's the nuance of how well does it look once it's finally done and installed. And then for me as the designer, it's like the moment that I leave the room and I'm not using the microphones, how is Joe Schmo off the street going to prevent himself from talking into the microphone and feeding back on a brand new nice system? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of challenges, probably one of the more challenging spaces that I've done because of all these things to consider. And then the biggest thing to consider with the Beck space, and it's probably what you guys may or may not talked about a lot, is the fact that you've got a nice shiny flat floor, you've got 4 walls, and you've got a nice big bucket on top that's plywood. So you don't really have any bit of sound dispersion. Even in this room, I can tell that it's sound dispersion because of the carpet. Your bodies, the clothes you wear, that all absorbs sound as well too. You can kind of hear it getting lost up there a little bit in the ceiling, but you get a little bit of vents, a little bit of stuff broken down, but they don't really have anything. So it's just like this big wide cavity to where everything bounces. If a person drops a plate in that room, everybody hears it. So it's definitely a challenge. Coming from homes, it's a lot easier. Obviously, you've got couch, if you've ever heard the term of a bass trap, where you need to tone the bass down in a room, couch is a great bass trap. Couches are great for that. So furniture, things of that nature, and people absorb sound. So while all this is good and the theory on this is great, the moment that you put 300 people in this room, you've just changed the overall soundscape, you know. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're in the public spaces, but that's kind of what I've got in terms of working on this project. So we've committed to the QSC products. They've been ordered. We'll be doing the install over the next 2 weeks maybe, and then from there we'll kind of say, all right, what next, or where do we want to go from here, and how does everybody feel about it? Was that good enough? And hopefully people are all happy. I know I'll be happy because I'm the one. It's a very unique situation for me. It's not every time that you get to be the designer, the installer, and the operator all in one thing. So it took me quite a few years to get to that point in time and to that ability. But you know, like I said, I started on a desktop computer in the basement and had to learn my way through. And like I said, you guys have the tools in front of you now that you could be me, if not much farther, you know, years down the road. And I'm not going to tell you what I make, but I do really well. I live in the city. My wife can stay home and not have to work. But even though she went back, but we were just fine. So
It probably feels good to make a living doing the things that you enjoy.
So I didn't always do this type of stuff. There's times in my life where I've had to port cars. I don't know if you know what that is. Move cars around a car lot. I used to work for Geek Squad actually. So when I graduated music tech, I didn't mention that. When I graduated music tech, I left there. That same year that I graduated, 60% of the studios were closing. I went to Chapman Recording Studio here in Kansas City. I said, hey, I've got this fresh piece of paper on Pro Tools. You know, I know all these different things. They're like, that's great, kid, get in line. You can start a 6-month non-paid internship. And I was like, well, I got 30 grand in debt to pay off. So, you know, the road to being like superstardom or that awesome producer, that awesome musician, it doesn't happen overnight. And you guys will probably learn that. You really have to stay with it. AV is, and any kind of content creation or any kind of content production, music and video wise, you really got to want it. The flip side of that is that with the right tools and with the right guidance and with a school and an academy like this, it should be a lot easier than, you know, most of the people my age and even people older had it in terms of kind of getting up to speed with it. You know what I mean? It's like 20 years ago, it took a lot of effort to get a photo online or to get a song online. Today, you can create something and tomorrow it could be available to everybody on Spotify or iTunes Music or something like that. So I guess my advice to kind of wrap this all up and come full circle is just be willing to try something, be willing to think outside of the box. There's been times where I've asked to move carts and plug in speakers and wrap mic cables. I don't know how many mic cables I've wrapped, but there's been times where I've taken a job just to wrap mic cables, and it led into a 1.5 years of doing some other freelance business. And that's the cool thing about AV and musicians and art types is we all kind of like to hang out with each other. You know what I mean? Like when you meet somebody that does music, you're like, oh, hey, I do music too. Oh, hey, we have that common bond. Same thing with art. Oh, I do art too. I do film and I do photography and things of that nature. Most of my opportunities came out of, yeah, I might know how to program and engineer and do all this stuff, but I'll go wrap cables for you for 5 hours. I'll help you guys do a loadout. And you know, that's where some of the best connections that I have in my life come from taking those little side jobs. So not knowing what anybody in this room's background is or where you want to go or whether you even want to be here or not, but yeah, if that's anything that I could share, that's been my 20-year spiel. That's what I've been doing.
Awesome.
So
Questions before we let him off the hook? While you're thinking of quality questions, what grabs me is just the variety of what James does, the variety of what Mike does as far as like photography and his video and audio background as well, and then buying a venue. So if you're noticing anything, hopefully it's that like getting your octopus hands out into a bunch of different realms.
it's really what it takes, yeah.
Getting involved. Yeah, keep doing it. So any thought of good questions during that time?
Yeah.
I have a great question.
Sure.
Is that the actual EQ you use for the?
No, that was just a demographic.
Do you usually use something like that? Or is it going all off?
So in music school when I went there, we talked a lot about subtractive EQing. So you know, a misconception. A lot of people get in the car and they're like, "Let's crank the bass and let's crank the treble up." And what you're really doing when you're doing that is you're adding noise because you're amplifying one frequency or the other. So in music school, we talked a lot about subtractive EQ, to where we only want to take away what we don't want. We don't want to introduce anything artificial. So you know, anytime that I start with a flat EQ, and let's say I've got a speaker or like a officiant or something like that, and we put him on a lapel mic or give him a handheld. I'm gonna walk around the room and I'm gonna use that mobile app, and if I start to hear a little bit of a ring, and you know, you always hear around 1 or 2K or maybe around 3 or 4K, well, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna slice that band out without affecting the overall track as much as possible. I mean, you can be really drastic with it and you can tell, or you can be kind of subtle, but that's where I came to the school of subtractive EQing. So, yeah, to answer your question, it was the graphic that you saw was just a generic graphic off the web as I was putting stuff together. When I EQ a person or a speaker, I almost do it, I start over every night basically. You know, because some people will hold the mic right up here, and I can project because I know that I'm talking to a microphone and to a room of people, but not everybody projects. And when you're doing wedding stuff and receptions, you get a lot of people that have never been on a microphone before, and frankly don't even want to be on a microphone before. So sometimes they'll talk about it like right out here. You know, and you're trying to amplify somebody that uses a microphone out there. You go up, you go up, you go up, you go up, and then all of a sudden that feedback kicks in. So, you know, we'll do subtractive EQing to try to prevent as much feedback as possible. Doesn't always work, but very rarely do I ever add anything or push anything up. So.
And also, do you test gigs when you set up speakers? Because I saw like a one, like a.
What's that?
You would test gigs of how loud.
Like how much we can push?
Yes.
So, yes and no. I mean, you know, that's the thing. We've got a sound system that we're going to rate for like 116 at listening height. Well, there's not too many times that I really want 116 because that's pretty loud, you know. So when you're listening to music and when you're speaking and things of that nature, you know, it's more about, you know, another thing that I learned from music tech was knowing how to fill your space. So as I come into this room, even I'm not on a microphone, I'm trying to fill the space with my voice based on, can that gentleman in the back corner over there hear me? Can that gentleman in the back over there hear me? And hopefully I'm not too loud for the ladies up here in front. You know what I mean? So that's kind of knowing your space is an important process. And so, yeah, we know like when you're standing around with the buddies and you're like the car guys, like, oh yeah, I can go up to 116 dB and stuff like that. We might test it once or twice. We might bust out a sound meter just to say, hey, check it out, we did it. But really, when it comes to practicality and when we're setting up for the night, it's more of a, let's mic check. Okay, that sounds great in the room. Okay, great. 100 people show up. I start talking. Oh, that sounds good. You know, we're still filling the space. Maybe just a little bit more. 300 people in the room. I'm going to crank it just a little bit more because more bodies, more absorption. But you know, sound, especially live sound, is a very dynamic thing. Take 10 people out of the room, it totally changes. You have 100 people on the dance floor. You're cranking hard, playing music. 50 people walk out. Man, it's going to be super loud for the people that are remaining because now you just had 50 people worth of absorption walk out. You know what I mean? So it's a very dynamic thing when you're, especially in bigger spaces. The bigger the space, the more dynamics, obviously. So.
Yeah, and also, have you ever done anything solo?
What do you mean, like a
Solo project?
as an artist or as a no? No,
Not even as a kid?
I played in a couple rock bands when I was 19 or 20. Well, you know, I played guitar. I actually still own 4 guitars and a bass. I did a cover band for a little while here in Lee Summit. Some of us 30-year-old guys sat around like, oh, let's do a cover band and maybe it'll be fun. And I've done that route. I can be a performer. I've done that kind of stuff. But to be perfectly honest, I go after wedding DJ gigs because they make the most money. So I've got a lot of friends that are club DJs. You know, and you might want to be the, you know, some of you in this room might want to be the next, you know, Deadmau or Avicii or somebody like that. And that's all great, but those guys, they took a long time to get there. And you're going to do a lot of like $100 or less club nights. You know, most of my friends that are club DJs, they make $100 or less for the night. As a wedding DJ, I don't think I do anything for less than $500. You know what I mean? So it's a hard trade-off. Some people give me a hard time, like, hey, you're not doing the fun stuff. You're just doing weddings, and that's boring. And I'm like, it is boring, but you know what's cool? Taking my $500, going home, and then doing whatever I want the next day. You know what I mean? And that money has basically allowed me to buy new lighting, you know, new guitar pedals and effects. And so, you know, you take one area that you maybe not love so much, and you do it anyway, so that it kind of opens the door up for other things. Just like wrapping cables to make a good connection, or just to earn some extra time. So, but
Thank you.
okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kate.
So everybody in this is Logic class, is that
We
right?
use Logic in Final Cut Pro.
Okay.
Reason as well.
So is it like
Here and there.
everybody's doing the same thing, or there's audio people and there's video people, or?
We all do the same thing. You may see the video people take their video skills and the audio a
Okay.
little bit higher. And then at the end, I think our best project is always like a music video where the person that writes the music, records the music, works with the person that is really good at photography, cinematography side of things.
Cool.
But everybody tries to get a certain broad skill set. That's the idea. Some of them go kicking and screaming. And then when we talk about microphones, the video people.
Tend to kind of drift off, and
Yeah.
and that's really kind of like that's the way it works in life too. I mean, if you like one specific track, the ones that get the awesome jobs are the ones that stick with that specific thing. I got a cousin I love to brag on because he was a mentor to me. He was 10 years older than me when I was going to music tech. He was like, hey James, I went to a music college like that 10 years ago. Let me give you some insight and whatever. And you guys probably don't know his name. Probably never. You could go hunt his name down. His name is Jeffrey Gardner. He was the director of photography for Robot Chicken for 7 or 8 years. Worked with Seth Green. He's now done. If anybody see the Google Mr. Rogers tribute like last week or 2 weeks ago, stop motion? That was him. He's done commercials for Toyota and things of that nature. So he became like one of Hollywood's stop motion people. And he did it with Robot Chicken with claymation, but now here he is 10 years later, he's getting commercials with Toyota, he's getting commercials with Google and things of that nature because he was that stop motion guy. So, you know, it's not a bad thing to say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to stick with and really chase after it. My perspective is the exact opposite. I never specialized in any specific thing other than like engineering and live sound, but I was always willing to take on whatever and work with a lot of different things. So now I have a lot to offer, and still people bring me in, but it's just it's kind of split 50-50, you know? You either get in being very specific or you get in because you're general, and that's where some of my clients will call me up and be like, we've got a bunch of stuff that we need to do. We don't want to have to hire 10 people, so let's just go get James because he knows those 10 different things. And that's kind of where I exist in that space, is that because I'm well-rounded with a lot of different things, I'm able to, yeah, we can do your lighting, we can do your video distribution, we can do your audio distribution, I even do some security and camera systems, access control badges, things of that nature. I'll give you, like my home setup, I've got a Sonos player in the living room, I've got a Sonos player upstairs, I've got a Sonos player in the nursery for our 2-year-old. I've got a little sensor on my door, and you know I can set home or away. When you open the door and it's set to away mode, what happens is I get a push notification to my phone. I can pull up and look at the camera, take pictures. It doesn't alert police or do any of that stuff. It doesn't play a loud siren. What I did was a pre-recorded sound on my Sonos player to where I found the legal description of prosecution for burglary in the city of Kansas City. So I'm basically reading to you the prosecution, like minimum 3 to 5 years for burglary, while there's a slow rolling police siren coming in from the background. So I have clients that have actually asked me for that kind of stuff. I've got a couple of clients that where you push the doorbell. One client wanted Darth Vader's theme. So you push the doorbell to their house, and then all of a sudden it's da 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 da. I mean, we engineered that. We said, hey, let's create this thing. So even when you get stuck doing some practical application with AV and integration, it's still pretty cool to say, hey, you know, I opened Photoshop to create a touch panel graphic, or I opened, for me it was Cubase and Pro Tools a lot before Ableton and Logic were really as big, but you know, I opened up an audio engineering suite to create a small little snippet for somebody's house, and now it's, you know, the door opens at the wrong time and something like music plays or something different plays as opposed to that loud, annoying wah, 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 wah. So it's, like I said, there's a lot of different things you can do. Integration really opens the door for all that. When I was sitting in school for music, I never would have ever considered what audio and video integration on an installation level ever meant. No idea. Didn't even know that existed, but it totally exists. So if you're a gear person, you might consider that as well too. There's always companies that are like the Mission Electronics or companies like mine that every once in a while we have a need to hire somebody. You know, you can get hired on, you know, just doing basic home installs. The next thing you know, 5 years later, you could be controlling your own team of people. So it's a lot of places, a lot of things that you can do with it all. So.
Right on. Pushing it together for James.
Thank you.